Okay, now this is going to be a poetry day. Now you know how I feel about poetry. Poetry sucks. It does. There's no getting away from it. Poetry is awful. Page 160 to 161. Poetry. Let's just get this done. Now I don't even think that text for performance even should cover poetry, because it's not, I don't believe it's really designed for performance. I think a poem like this is meant to be read. I don't even think it has value from the perspective of being read. I think this only mattered to the person who wrote it. Before we get into this, I don't like this poem. I don't think it has any literary value. I think it's one of those things where it's been overvalued because of the subject matter. And I think a lot of writing falls into this category. A lot of movies fall into this category. Now we looked yesterday at the. I hesitate to use the word Holocaust. I'll qualify that later. But that's how it's termed. The Nazis' rise to power, the killing of the Jews, etc., etc. I think this whole incident of history has lost any historical value, because it's been so poorly represented and has been lied about so many times that I think it doesn't really hold up anymore. I think it's just been beaten to death by people with an agenda, political agenda. And it's very sad, because there was so much to learn. I'm one of those people that doesn't agree with capital punishment, the death penalty. Those of you that went to the debate, that was in there. Those of you that didn't go to the debate, there was a list of 20 possible discussion topics, and one we always throw in there is capital punishment is valid. And I strongly side against capital punishment. I always have. I don't believe in murder. I don't believe in killing at all. At least I didn't up to recently. The last few years have made me question that. I'll get to that. I've never agreed with state-run murder. It's not in human nature, at least the people I consider human. It's just not in our nature to kill. And we know that to be a fact if you look at the history of the world. We haven't gone around brutally murdering each other. We just haven't, until very, very recent times, around the industrial explosion. And then things have changed. Then we've had war for profit. And it's the same people running the world as it always was, only now they can do it on a grander scale and get more for it. Fear is a huge motivator. Villainizing enemies is another way of getting huge profits, and unfortunately that's what we've seen, and we've ended up with this horrific situation where the very weak and stupid have been allowed to completely sweep up all the control in the world. Look at someone like Bill Gates. That is not an intelligent man. Look at Elon Musk. Elon Musk is now lauded as some intellectual genius. He is an absolute fraud. He's a fraud. He was going on about his Hyperloop. He's going to run this loop around the world, and it's going to transfer people from one end of the planet to the other in seconds, and all the other crap. And it never worked. It was supposed to have been around 2 years ago, before COVID. Never happened. It never will. It never will. He's got one test track that is something like 100 meters long, and it's the second largest facility of its kind anywhere in the world. And by that I mean that they have to pump out the atmosphere, because the train would have to operate in a vacuum. So effectively the train would have to operate as a spaceship, because pressurized interior, because there'd be no oxygen anywhere in the tunnel. Pressurizing a tunnel is incredibly difficult. We've only got this 100-meter test facility. It's the second largest in the entire world, and that's not fully pressurized. That's not fully vacuumed. So it's not going to be possible. It simply isn't going to be possible. But he's raised millions, hundreds of millions to build this thing, which it's never going to work. SpaceX, never going to work. They lost 40 satellites last week due to solar flares. They want to put double the amount of satellites already in orbit around the Earth. They want to double that with more SpaceX satellites. And NASA have actually started complaining. NASA, and they're not exactly geniuses either, and they've started complaining about the amount of litter around the planet now. And SpaceX wants to double it. And they've said, oh, don't worry. Our satellites are self-driving just like our cars, but the cars routinely kill people by crashing into them. So it's not a good argument. The cars only have to operate in two-dimensional space. Satellites have to operate in three, and they're already causing chaos in orbit. Elon Musk has never followed through on any of his promises. It's like the truck, the Tesla truck. They were taking pre-orders for that. So basically, loads of people paid a deposit and in the millions of dollars. So they were paid millions and millions of dollars for trucks that never happened. They never got their trucks. They weren't bulletproof. They were supposed to be bulletproof. He's hammering on the glass and it just broke. That's a mistake. I mean, it's on YouTube, look it up. They never got their trucks. They never will. They'll slowly return their money, but years later, and look what happened in the meantime. The value of your currency has massively declined because of COVID. So all these people were paying their millions of dollar deposits, and then all their money is now worthless, and they'll give it back to them. So Tesla have invested all of that into stocks like drug companies, and they have made billions in profit off of the Tesla truck without actually building a single unit. Crazy. That's how the world works. That's what people like Elon Musk are like. And don't go thinking he's a genius, because he's not. He's a vile businessman at most, and ultimately he'll get caught. I mean, he is caught. I mean, everyone knows he's a scammer. He's never actually followed through. But this is what we've got. These people are running the world, and we're all acting like that's a fantastic thing. Bill Gates is a criminal. He's a criminal. He's a wanted war criminal in several countries, including India. Oh, we're getting bleeps. That's weird. So, as we saw yesterday, World War II was caused by the financial devastation of World War I. It left people very angry, very lost. It left people, good people, fighting to get enough food to feed their family. And people in that position will do terrible things. I can promise you. If my family were hungry, I don't think I would draw the line at going to work every day. I would do what I had to do to feed my family. And that's where they put the German people, into that horrendous situation. It was a political war. World War I was closed politically, it destroyed the German economy, and it kept on causing lasting damage where people simply didn't have enough food to eat. And that never works well. And it drove them towards this situation, which was planned, which was absolutely planned. All of this was planned out long before World War I started, before a bullet was fired. All of this was planned out. If you don't believe me, look it up. Again, look it up yourself. It's all planned out. All World War I, II, and III was all planned out. The situation was all plotted. So, the Nazis picked on the Jews because the Jewish banks had been heavily investing in the disaster that was World War I, and it had been fermented for a long time. The Jewish people are not as innocent as they would like to have you believe. They have these documentaries that show how they were just innocent victims. Do you really believe that? Do you really believe that an entire country of people would suddenly say, these people are the villains for no good reason, I just want to hurt them? There's reasons for these things. And I did notice that the documentary never covered any of those reasons. It never asked, why would they think this? In fact, if you look very carefully, as the newspaper headlines are coming up, the 4,000-year war, you try Googling that, you will not get a single hit. Because I was interested, why did Germany think we were fighting a 4,000-year war against the Jews? You cannot get that question answered in mainstream methods. Google won't give you an answer. DuckDuckGo will not give you an answer. These things will not answer that question for you. But over history, the Jews were made very unwelcome throughout Europe for thousands of years. They would move in from the Middle East. They would have illegal money lending practices where they would lend money as usury at a huge profit. crippling countries as they went through. They were parasitic moneylenders. There's this thing called the blood libel. They call it the blood libel. The Jews call it the blood libel because it was meant to be a big lie, where in medieval times and further forward, children were disappearing and food was turning up. Jewish food was turning up with human blood in it. And this actually may be the root of all the vampire legends, where these people were coming in and they had a certain look about them, and their children were disappearing around the neighborhood, blood was being drunk, the only way to fight back was Christianity. All these things actually might be the thing that led to the idea of vampires in around Eastern Europe. So it might be that was actually what caused it. So the Jewish communities have often been told to leave, or at least to take away their business practices and go somewhere else with them. And that's how it started in Germany too. It started out by, it said in the documentary even, they were invited to leave, and they didn't. Things escalated to a ridiculous level, but we have these very angry people wanting to strike back. And they picked these people as, whether you want to believe that they were fall guys or whether there was any reason for what they felt, really doesn't matter at this point. But there was a strong movement towards getting the Jews out of Central Europe. It's a very, very complex thing. Please don't just believe one documentary. It's a very complex thing. One of the Patton, American general, one of the most celebrated American generals, after World War II, he was murdered. He was murdered for what he said. He came out and became very anti-Jewish and very anti-American after the war, and he claimed we fought for the wrong side. We made a huge mistake, and now we've put the wrong people in control, and they will destroy Europe. There was a plan to destroy Europe using communism as a weapon against the rest of the world. Whether you believe that or not is entirely up to you, but you should have that choice by reading both sides of the argument, because this is where we go wrong today. We are indoctrinating our youth into thinking that there is only one side of this argument, and it really isn't. This is a very complex argument. There are lots of facts that you have not been taught, that won't be taught in a history book of any kind. You've got to go looking for it, and you've got to look pretty hard these days because Google simply will not fill it in. There was a famous incident where people were Googling, "Are Jews evil?" and that's now been removed from Google. You can't get a hit for that now. It used to be that it would auto-fill, "Are Jews evil?" because it was so commonly searched for, and they blocked that. So nothing should be blocked, nothing. All information should be free, and you should be well enough educated to decide for yourself. That is where I would love the youth of today to be. So well educated and so well informed that you can make choices. Instead, I asked a question yesterday in Google Class. Most people didn't even bother to fill it in, which tells me a lot I need to, almost everything I need to know about the youth of today. You're disaffected. The 2 years lockdown has probably entirely crippled your grade. I don't think you have glowing futures unless you really, really sort yourselves out, because you're not even answering questions in class, and you can't even get through a 38-minute documentary. That worries me, that does. And whether you're making informed choices, whether you're making informed decisions, I don't think so, because the answers I got back, most of them were nonsensical. They didn't make any sense. I don't know if you said what you thought I wanted to hear, but people were saying history, repeat, history, repeat. It's like, well, you're just using the words from the question again and trying to turn it into an answer. It was very poor, and I do think that people these days, your age, have always had problems working out what's true because you're so indoctrinated, and I think it's really escalated. I've been in this job 10 years, and I think it's escalated. I've never seen such a disaffected grade, and I keep telling you, you have got to make the difference. You really have got to make that difference for yourselves. You've got to work much harder than all the previous grade 11s to get to the same results, because you're overcoming all these problems. But I don't think you will. I think you'll just say, this is easy. It's easy. It's not easy. No, it's up to you. So let's have a look at this poem, Say This City Has 10 Million Souls. Now this was written by a German Jew about the situation in Nazi Germany, Berlin, when the Nazis were moving in. Now again, I don't like this poem. I don't think it's particularly well written. It's awkward. It's poorly done. It focuses very much on your emotions rather than your sense of right and wrong, your logic. We're going to cover that as well, because one of the nice things about this at the moment is there's only a couple of things left. We've got this poem and we've got a sitcom script, and that's it really. That's finished. So I've got to fill the rest in for you. So we can afford to slow down and look at these things. So we're going to do that. We're going to look this week at these kind of warnings about the future that were made years ago. So yeah, history is repeating itself, but we'll get to that. So let's have a read through of it, because I don't like it. Say this city has 10 million souls. Some are living in mansions, some are living in holes. Yet there's no place for us, my dear. Yet there's no place for us. Once we had a country and we thought it fair. Look in the atlas and you'll find it there. We cannot go there now, my dear, we cannot go there now. In the village churchyard there grows an old yew. Every spring it blossoms anew. Old passports can't do that, my dear, old passports can't do that. The consul banged the table and said, if you've got no passport, you're officially dead. But we are still alive, my dear, but we are still alive. Went to a committee, they offered me a chair, asked me politely to return next year. But where shall we go today, my dear? But where shall we go today? Came to a public meeting, the speaker got up and said, if we let them in, they will steal our daily bread. He was talking of you and me, my dear, he was talking of you and me. Thought I heard the thunder rumbling in the sky. It was Hitler over Europe saying they must die. Oh, we were in his mind, my dear, oh, we were in his mind. Saw a poodle in a jacket fastened with a pin. Saw a door opened and a cat let in. But they weren't German Jews, my dear, they weren't German Jews. Went down to the harbour and stood upon the quay. Saw the fish swimming as if they were free. Only 10 feet away, my dear, only 10 feet away. Walked through a wood, saw the birds in the trees. They had no politicians and sang at their ease. They weren't the human race, my dear, they weren't the human race. Dreamed I saw a building with 1,000 floors, 1,000 windows and 1,000 doors. None of them was ours, my dear, none of them was ours. Stood on a great plain in the falling snow, 10,000 soldiers marching to and fro, looking for you and me, my dear, looking for you and me. Okay, so I guess it pulls at your heartstrings. I guess that's the idea of it. We've got these different ideas of these displaced people. This wouldn't work. If you just read this poem and had no idea of what's supposed to have happened in World War II, this wouldn't make any sense. You wouldn't care about this. This only works because the poem doesn't provide context. You're expected to have the context already. So this is the only reason that this poem works at all, that you're expected to have the context for it. That is bad writing. That is bad writing. Which is why you've never heard of this poet, this Auden, W.H. Auden, never heard of him. I don't know if it's a male or female, I have no idea, I've never heard of them. It's not well written, but would you expect it to be well written? Would you care if it was well written? If it really did convey an important message, then no, it wouldn't matter. Anne Frank's diary, for instance. Anne Frank, for those who didn't know, she was in Holland, of all places, and they were hidden in an attic. Her family were hidden in an attic when the Jews were being persecuted throughout Europe. They were hidden from the from the Germans when they were occupying the city. They hid there. She was taken out, her family were captured, they were taken out to the gas chambers. But see, this is nonsense, because even history records that Anne Frank died of typhoid, because most people in these prison camps died of typhoid. So yeah, she died of typhoid. It was just a little girl. And this is where we get the real problem here. These politicians doing this or this, trying to control and regulate everything for everybody. And all it really comes down to is control and numbers. And the real people who pay the price are people like you and I, and people like Anne Frank, and whoever wrote this poem. Ordinary people suffer for the machinations of these idiots who want power. And it's crazy. There's more to it. There's more to it. They're doing it for a very good reason, because it's been going on for a very long time. It's been going on for a huge number of years. This is not new. World War I and II wasn't new. Spanish flu, current situation, none of these things are new. They're just repeating over and over again. And what we're seeing is an increasing downturn in education, so that the people that it's happening to don't understand. That way, these unintelligent people who want to run the world can just keep using the same old tricks over and over and over again. And we're seeing this globalized clamping down of left-wing politics around the world. And they're talking now about the Great Reset. The Great Reset is basically communism, just like they tried in China. Can you imagine that situation throughout the rest of the world? Prison camps for anyone who doesn't agree with them. They're talking about banning Christianity, outlawing Christianity. Not any of the other religions, mind you, just Christianity. It's crazy. It's a situation where it's getting out of control. And throughout Europe now, there are violent protests against all this stuff. And we've seen it all before, and you saw it in the documentary yesterday. But all of these things come just before worse things. We've got a situation where in World War I in France, half the male population was killed. Half the men were killed because, of course, we get rid of the strongest segment of the population in terms of the ability to fight. Who's going to stop the next wave of leadership? No one. There's no one to fight it. And that's what we see all around the world at the moment, if you know what you're looking for. And this is repeating itself. At the time this was written, the Jews were the enemy. Now the enemy is other things, and I'm sure you know what I'm talking about. I'm sure you've seen enough American social media memes to figure it all out. It's a crazy situation, and it isn't going away, and it's not stopping. It's not slowing down, it's escalating. And it's been going for many, many hundreds of years. It's a crazy situation. These people believe some incredibly weird stuff, and they really do think that their God has given them this privileged right to own the world. You look at the Israeli flag, it shows two lions with the Star of David in the middle, and the two lines represent the two rivers at the opposite ends of the Middle East, where they want greater Israel, where they want to spread out and take over the whole of the Middle East. It's crazy. So these people want power, they want to be bigger and more important than they really are. I don't know. Seems to me to be utterly insane, but we live in an insane world. So there you go. And unfortunately, when these people are all fighting for this, they're fighting for that, you see the Masons on one side, the Jews on the other, the Americans, the Germans, whatever. It's always people like you and I that pay the price for it. So this poem attempts to portray what these people thought it was like. We've got a city of 10 million people, and the title itself is poorly written. A good writer would have got this down to 2 or 3 words to make an impact. We don't want a long title, that's poor writing. It's a city of 10 million souls, some living elegant lives, some living in dirt. Not many living in mansions at the time, I would think. Once we had a country and we thought it fair. Yeah, Germany was probably the fairest country in the world. During the American Civil War, Germans were the first to fight slavery. They were the first protesters. The Germans in America were the first people who started refusing to deal with slave traders. They were starting to change the laws. Germans were a good people. We had our country, we thought it fair. Look in the atlas, you'll find it there. I mean, that's just a bad rhyme. Okay, old passports can't do that, my dear. I mean, that doesn't mean much to us, but yeah, they were taking away their passports, their right to travel. They were making it difficult for them. They were separating them from society. You're officially dead. Guess what's coming? Public meetings. This is interesting. If we let them in, they will steal our daily bread. Can you imagine the situation there, where you've got these people who are so afraid of feeding themselves that they're afraid to let more people in? I don't feel like the Jews were the victim of that particular verse. I don't believe heroes and villains in a story like this. Shades of grey. Hitler over Europe, they must die. Hitler never said that. Another historical variation on actual facts. Hitler actually said, "We do not wish to execute the Jews, we want them to remain so people can see why we had to do what we had to do." So, not quite sure what he meant by that, because you just can't find this stuff out anymore. It's all hidden. They tried to ban his book, Mein Kampf. He wrote that, My Struggle, and he tried to ban it. And this is why I so vehemently disagree with the death penalty. If we ban Hitler's book, we stand to lose the story of what happened to him that took him there, and we can learn so much from that. Same thing when we take a murderer and we execute them. We have lost the opportunity to learn from that person. And what we can stand to learn from that person is what went wrong to make them into a killer. Because human beings aren't like that. What went wrong to turn you into a killer? And how do we stop that happening again and again and again? But when we get angry and we murder them because they murdered somebody else, we lose the opportunity to stop it happening again to somebody else. Quite apart from the humanity of saying it's wrong to kill, so we're going to kill you. To me, that makes no sense. That's the worst form of hypocrisy. It makes no sense at all. Saw a poodle in a jacket fastened with a pin, saw a door open and a cat let in. But so animals were treated better than Jews. This was actually a thing at the time, that Jews were subhuman. They were below animals. Patton said the same. He said that they were, after World War II, he said their behaviour was subhuman. And he was fighting for them at the beginning. As far as the Americans were concerned, this was a war over Jews. They had that much power in America at the time. And they only got in at the end. America only got into the war at the end of the war, when everything had happened that was supposed to happen. Or not, you decide. And again, we've got this whole idea, oh God, you see it all the time, say, the Germans were bad. But most Germans weren't Nazis at all. They were protesting it, they were fighting it. It was a small minority, but it caught hold. No freedom, blah, blah, blah. Through a woods, bird in the tree, yeah. There were no politicians. They had no politicians. Politicians do just make everything worse. Politics, let's get rid of it. It doesn't work. Democracy doesn't work. We keep finding that out time and time again. None of this works, but we just keep doing it. Albert Einstein said the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. And here we are doing the same thing over and over again, and of course it's the same result. Dreamed I saw a building with 1,000 floors, blah, blah, blah. Stood on a great plain, 10,000 soldiers. Okay, so there's things in there that are historically reported on. I just feel like only one side of this argument is ever made. We're not allowed to question it. There are laws in Europe, so you're not allowed to question that these things happened. That's insane. That should never happen. There's all sorts of reasons why they say that, but that doesn't make any sense. They said somebody might question this one day because it was so hard to believe. So we should make laws so they're never allowed to question it. But that's not really how questions work. That's not how the truth works. So as soon as I read that, when I was a child, and I read, you're not allowed to question this, straight away I went, then it didn't happen. Because that's how politics works. When they tell you you're not allowed to ask questions about something, then I immediately know I have to ask questions about this because there's a problem. Any right-thinking person should be thinking the same way, really. If you're told you're not allowed to ask questions, you're not allowed to talk about this, you know you've got a problem. What was his name? There was a philosopher that said, if you ever want to know who controls you, look to who you are not allowed to question. Voltaire. If you ever want to know who's in control, look at the people you're not allowed to talk about. There you go. And this, I think, is what the Nazi Party saw, and this is what they reacted to. I don't think the Jews were the problem. I really don't. I really don't. They didn't just pick on the Jews. They picked on all the other races too. These were a severely bullied people who ended up lashing out and bullying a lot of other people. This was a broken country that then wanted to take its strength out on everybody else. This was a country that attacked its own mentally unwell people, its people who had physical shortcomings, such as disabilities. This is a country that turned on all sorts of members of its own races and countries. Racial purity, we're not allowed to talk about that now, racial purity. But Hitler himself said that in his perfect version of Germany, he would not be allowed to reproduce. He wasn't married, which is very rare for a world leader, wasn't married, didn't have children. He said, I would not be allowed to reproduce because I'm not pure enough. I think he had Jewish blood in him as well. He didn't consider himself worthy of reproduction, and he wanted to make a better world. I think there's more to this. I think there's a lot more to this, because they consider themselves Nordic, and they weren't. They absolutely weren't what they said that they were. Their ideal was this blonde, blue-eyed Aryan race, and the Germans, they don't look like that. They just don't. So I think there was a lot more going on. There is still the search for this master race going on today. We've got eugenics programs. It's a crazy world we live in, and I tell you, you've got to do some research for yourself if you want to understand it. So I'm going to leave it there in terms of the poem. Go through the questions, and then we'll go through the answers.